I'm not going to speak to Israel's response. It'll be up to the IDF and leadership about the time, place, and manner of the reprisal. But clearly, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps cannot sit in Tehran, 1,000 miles away from Israel, and launch a genocidal campaign against the Jewish state without any consequences. There needs to be personally felt consequences for this kind of action. That's the immediate imperative. But in the long run, the United States needs to architect a new strategy towards Iran, because ever since 2003, when George W. Bush kicked down the door in Iraq and left a vacuum of power that Iran filled, there has not been a coherent strategy against the Islamic Republic, and it has helped fuel this escalation in the Middle East. And we have our objectives around what the strategy should be. I think we need to wedge Iran from China. I think we got to uplift its moderate middle class. We got to marginalize its hardliners. But we need bipartisan consensus, not finger pointing, but consensus about how we go forward.
Well, Congressman, as you say, Iran does need to face consequences for this action. Could those consequences not have consequences by extension, specifically, say, for the U.S. military presence in the Middle East? As we know, thousands more troops have been sent there as the tension has been rising.
America will need to forward deploy to ensure that we can protect our troops as well as our ally Israel in the region. And in the long term, we need to continue the defense and intelligence cooperation that has allowed aerial defense systems like Iron Dome to provide a very important shield for Israeli civilians. That shield is not just about protecting human life, by the way, of course, that's its primary aim. It is also a de-escalatory mechanism, because it affords Israel the latitude to de-escalate after incredible escalatory actions like what we just saw, where 100 ballistic missiles were fired at its population centers.
Congressman, we spoke a short time ago with your colleague from Tennessee, Chuck Fleischman, who said that the Biden administration deserves some of the blame for this happening, because he claims that the administration has not been hard enough on Iran and has not forcefully defended Israel enough. This is a similar refrain that we're hearing from the Trump campaign. How do you respond?
It's false. Joe Biden is one of the strongest pro-Israel presidents in American history, and he's been walking a tightrope in the Middle East, where there are no good choices that come to the resolute desk in the Oval Office. He is rejecting calls from the hard left that would have had the United States handcuff Israel and prevent the return of any hostages and platform Hamas for post-war governance in Gaza. But he's also rejected calls from the hard right that are seeking to directly escalate and enmesh U.S. troops in Middle Eastern warfare. We spent 2 decades doing conflict in the Middle East. I don't think Americans want to have U.S. troops in combat in the Middle East anymore. We have to orient towards the pacing strategic priority, which is China in the Indo-Pacific. And that means we need Israel and the Abraham Accords to basically be a hedge and a stability mechanism for the Middle East.
Well, sir, as we consider the question around Israel here, and specifically its relationship with the U.S., knowing that all of this activity we've seen in recent weeks has come as the Biden administration has been pushing for restraint, for a ceasefire deal, not just with Hamas, but also one that was on the table for a ceasefire with Hezbollah. Instead, what we've gotten is the taking out of the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, and a ground incursion into Lebanon. What do you make of the administration's dealings with and attempts to influence Israel, which don't seem to have been, frankly, effective at all?
Well, we've heard from the administration that they support Israel's limited ground operation in southern Lebanon to displace Hezbollah missile launchers that have made it impossible for 70,000 Israelis to repopulate northern Israel territory, and that we support eliminating Nasrallah, who is a terrorist who has Lebanese blood on his hands, Syrian blood, American blood, Israeli blood. The world is safer without him. Now, there are obvious frustrations between the president and the prime minister about strategy in Gaza, particularly Netanyahu's unwillingness to help architect governance that is an alternative to Hamas, Palestinian-led, Arab-backed, Western-supported. But that tension in no way undermines the fundamental alliance between these two democratic nations.
We have been surging troops and material into the region. As you well know, Congressman, a few thousand more troops were sent to the Middle East just this week in anticipation of this moment. Where's the line on the U.S. defending Israel if this continues to escalate?
Well, the United States, we're not going to telegraph our lines about where we stand with our allies or protecting our own troops. The nations that mean to do harm to us and to our allies need to know that wherever they might be, the United States is going to protect our troops and our interests and our allies. And that includes, of course, Israel and our troops stationed in Iraq. I think that message has been received in capitals across the region, and it was demonstrated in April. It was demonstrated again today with really an impressive example of U.S. and Israeli technology and cooperation helping to shoot down 100 ballistic missiles. But we need to maintain this deterrent going forward. But we also have to pair it, as I said, with congressionally led consensus on a new Iran strategy. Because for 20 years now, we've been pointing fingers at each other. We've been saying, you did this and he did that. And it is not working against Iran. We need to have a first principles, bipartisan, congressionally anchored approach to Iran that wedges it from China and that marginalizes its hardliners.
Congressman, it is not lost on any of us that all of this is happening in the Middle East on the day that we are set to see Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance share a debate stage to talk about policy, including foreign policy, with the reminder that we saw during the primary campaign when Joe Biden was still leading the Democratic ticket. In states like Michigan, there was a sizable portion of the vote that chose not to vote for him over protest of the ongoing war in Gaza. In Michigan, for example, there were more than 100,000 uncommitted votes. How difficult is it going to be for the new Democratic ticket of Tim Walz and Kamala Harris to navigate this issue if it's back in the headlines in this way as we get closer to Election Day just 5 weeks from today?
The uncommitted vote for Joe Biden in Michigan was similar to the uncommitted vote for Barack Obama and his reelection campaign in Michigan. So I don't think that is a strong signal of discontent within the Democratic base with Joe Biden or with Kamala Harris. The simple reality is that foreign policy is not going to be a decisive voting issue for swing voters. What we have seen is that the state of the economy is overwhelmingly a top issue. Immigration is an important issue. Reproductive rights are an important issue. But even amongst the demographic cohort that researchers often point to as the one most animated by Gaza, which is young voters, even then it's barely a top 10 issue. So I think the important thing is for our current commander-in-chief and for our next commander-in-chief to continue to conduct U.S. strategy in the best interests of the United States and our allies and for free nations throughout the world and not worry about polls.